And today we've got a special guest, but we're going to get to that later. Let's go ahead and jump right into the next episode. Episode 3 just dropped. I stayed up till midnight to watch it. The Battle of the Slaughtered Lamb. Chris, let's take it away.
You know, one thing before we really get started here that I have noticed is we keep saying episode 3, but these are chapters.
You know what? That's a really good point.
3.
And that actually, I have noticed this time that there's really no credit sequence. Each time we get a chapter entrance, and it's a book, and a sort of a rendered picture of a book. So you're right; it does really feel much more like chapters in an ongoing story, and not like an episodic.
Yes, and the movie, of course, was the prologue to the real story. That
yes,
we have
the prequel.
Here. Yes. And this one begins, as you said, with the really great looking kind of storybook that begins every chapter. And we get this wonderful voice coming in telling us this tale of a character named Thul. Thuul. Because of course that's how you spell Thul.
Rightful heir.
Heir to what empire?
The Chimerian Empire of 10,000 years ago.
I'm glad you confirmed that because I typed it into my phone and it somehow came out as Kum O Ern.
Yes.
And no, that's not it. It's
not at all. We seem to be sort of building up the Chimerian Empire as it sort of almost feels like an ancient Rome to the Willow world. And you know, when you get that first image of all the domes and towers, it has a very sort of stately Romanesque quality to it as well.
And of course, Thul's brother Tiberius, a very Roman name.
Yes, yeah.
As well. Wants to be king, your classic, you know, the little brother wants to be the king, but the big brother's the king, so the little brother raises an army. And it looks like the little brother has a legit shot of overthrowing the kingdom. But Annabelle comes along, a fae of the grove.
I'm glad you caught that as well, because that was, to me, like the most interesting thing in this entire beat. And she's a very elderly looking woman, very much like Shalindria or Raziel, and it leads me to think that there's a sort of another people out there that we have a lot to learn about. I watch with the captions on all the time, and it was spelled F-A-Y, which is sort of unusual because I usually assume it's going to be F-A-E for this sort of using of it. So I'm very curious to see what world building that heralds, but apparently the Fae of the Grove lived side by side with men, or with Daikini.
Yeah, I was not familiar with the word Fae, and I looked it up, and the definition is simply fairy.
Yes, absolutely.
And so we have fairies in this world who do not look like the Fae of the Grove, Annabelle, that we met in the movie, of course. Sherlindria and all the little fairies that, you know, kiss Willow's nose and everything. So the definition of a fairy seems pretty loose. Maybe there's the fays and there's the fairies and
well, sir, fae traditionally, and please tweet at me and tell me if I'm wrong, but fae traditionally sort of encompasses like a lot of the fairy kingdoms, and that might encompass brownies and little fairies that fly around, and red caps or other sorts of different fairy entities. So, you know, maybe fae is sort of an overarching terminology, and you know, Shalindria or Raziel, possibly like Annabelle, might be of that group.
You've obviously seen more Tinkerbell movies than me, Cameron.
I absolutely adore the Tinkerbell movies. I will go to bat for every single one of them. They're fantastic.
All right. So yeah, Annabelle, as a sort of blacksmith, is creating a cuirass made of pure chromium. Khromium.
You caught that K at the beginning of chromium as well.
Once again, we have a word that is in our world, but spelled with a K instead of a C. We have
it's instant fantasy right there.
Something like that. Yeah, right. You know, chromium, I know, is a word for comic book covers from the 90s that were like another $1 or $2 and supposedly much more collectible, but now worth about 10 cents a piece.
It seems to be a little more valuable in this world, the way it's spoken about.
Yes. And so this cuirass, also another thing Annabelle created was the Lux Arcana.
Yeah, which is like, it seems to be sort of a key that, that powers the cuirass and allows it to be activated only by the correct user.
Yes, and only someone who is worthy. So it's sort of a Excalibur Mjolnir thing going on here. with the Lux Arcana. I guess you can probably wear the cuirass if you're just a normal person, but you can only unlock its powers with the Lux Arcana if you're, a chosen one or whatever.
I have a feeling we're going to find out.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
And so this story continues to go on, and we realize it's Borman telling it, and he gets cut off by Kit, who is being told this story because Borman feels it's important in the story of her father to get this whole idea of the Chimerian cuirass and its history and everything. And she's kind of had enough, and she makes a joke about his name being Boorman.
Yeah,
and he's really boring her right now.
Once again, we have a cultural moment or a interesting story that I was fascinated by, and Kit was like, "I don't want to do this. Let's go away." So I was mad in that moment. I wanted to hear the rest of that story.
A line that I got to think is a meta kind of thing. Your generation has zero attention span for epic tales.
Yeah, which I think is sort of wonderful because, we think of that as being of the moment. But, you look back at like Plato writing about the younger generation at his time, and he was complaining about what they were wearing and about how they had no attention span. So, yeah, that's sort of a persistent generational complaint.
Yes. So yeah, they kind of chat for a little bit, and then before we know it, Willow comes in and is like, "Hey, where's Allura? Everybody, where did she go?
Missing yet again."
And so yeah, everyone kind of takes off on their own directions. Of course, if you remember from the end of the previous episode, Allura had been abducted by Ballantyne, who is now under full control of the Gales.
Yes, shortly after completing a spell that she had been trying to do, which made a berry bush sprout in the woods.
And Kit sees this and is a little disappointed. She says, "Oh, nuts, really?" Yeah.
A very lovely line reading, because it sort of says a whole lot about how she has to change her worldview in that moment.
Yeah, it kind of says it all. Like, she knows that Allura really is Allura, even though she's been questioning it since the last episode, where she was even like, "Maybe I'm Allura," and that sort of thing. Incidentally, I have a very crazy theory I'm going to share with you connected to all this at the very end of the show.
I can't wait.
Theory is a very kind word, because there's almost no chance that what I have in my head is actually going to happen. But
if there's a place for nonsense predictions, it's right here.
Yeah. It is complete nonsense, yet makes sense. So, eventually, Jade confronts Ballantyne, who has Allura, and of course, Jade and Ballantyne have a relationship that I think it's easy to forget. It's only like one scene really in the first episode where
they've made it clear that they have a close relationship, but they haven't at this point defined that relationship.
Well, I think that's really the one who made it possible for her to go to Galadorn's night school or whatever it was.
Yeah, they definitely have a professional, but even closer than that relationship.
Sword. I just remembered. Yeah,
the
sword as well.
So there's a great deal of regret and trepidation on her face as she approaches him, because it's very clear that he's not okay.
Yeah, and since her family was slaughtered, we learned also it feels like he's probably the closest thing to a father figure that she has.
I think that's outright confirmed later on, which is something I wanted to talk about that time, which I think is a nice way that they did it.
Yeah. So, Jade's there talking to him. Eventually, everybody else shows up. Silas, gotta love Silas. He says, "We've got you 5-1."
Yeah, I wrote down 2 knives with like 4 exclamation points after it. Truly,
he's not afraid to use them.
Truly a fearsome
Loves
bearing.
Stab in the back, as we'll learn later.
My boy.
Yeah, he says, "We got you 5-1." Graydon says, "I don't know how much help I'm going to be able to contribute here, Silas," and so 4.5-1. Works much better in the show than when I reenact it. But
I thought it was really nice how confident Silas is in his
Yeah.
abilities. And yeah, it's he's an incredibly charming presence.
Right, right. So, there's all this kind of commotion, and Willow throws like some kind of a smoke bomb
Yeah,
as
well, so first he orders Graydon in the
right.
chaos to go rescue Alora, and Alora seems less than thrilled to see Graydon. And
It's more like she's surprised that it's him. He's the
yes,
one who's
that he would be heroic.
yeah.
And at the
But it
meantime,
kind of
Willow
plays up.
also,
I don't know. I feel like, they definitely are trying to build something between these two because they had that conversation in the last episode
oh,
where,
absolutely,
it felt
yeah,
like they were kind of on the same wavelength. So
yeah.
I think it's fair to say there's some sort of love story evolving there.
And at the meantime, Willow tells Silas, "I'm making a diversion. Quick, go shiv someone."
Yes, exactly. Um, so yeah, he actually does say shiv someone, which he does.
Quite handily.
Yes, yes, and not the first time he would do it in the episode.
Also in this fight, Kit sort of finds herself in an endangered position, and Jade is the one who steps in and rescues her at the expense of landing a killing blow on Valentine.
Right, yes. But yeah, so things aren't going so great in Willow's eyes, and he throws like a smoke bomb or something.
Yeah, it's unclear. The sequence sort of ends very rapidly. You see Alora being pulled out of frame on the horse. You rapidly find out that the smoke bomb that Willow thought was going to be the diversion gave them cover to escape. And Graydon really takes that personally, like he screwed up there. But I really feel like Willow made the giant mistake there.
Yeah. I think you're right. I didn't think Graydon really screwed up. It's not his fault he couldn't see what was happening anymore.
Yeah. And he's, admittedly out of his element, and when it came to physical combat, couldn't stand up for that moment. In that moment,
yeah. So the bad guys get away. The good guys start talking about what just happened, and Graydon drops some serious kind of knowledge about possession.
Yeah. At this point, it's clear that he knows a lot more than he should, and I think even Willow is aware that he is more knowledgeable than he would have expected. But Willow's reaction to that is one of being sort of threatened, and sort of a self-confidence reaction.
When did you become High Aldwin? He said.
Yeah. But yeah, it's clear that Graydon has. And right after this, he's able to translate something in Narcotic, which Willow refers to as cursed Narcotic. Which
you speak cursed Narcotic.
Yeah,
it's a nice kind of throwaway line. How do we think he knows so much? Is he just well educated, or do you think there's something more to that?
Well, I going back to my theory that his father is up to no good and planning something, which Willow sort of confirms when he says, "Tell your father it wasn't a very illustrious name to begin with." Mm-hmm. I do think that he's been trained or placed here in some respects. Whether or not he and his dad knew that there would be this complication of the Gales and Eric's kidnapping, or whether he was just supposed to insinuate himself into the Tyrosline Kingdom without all of this chaos. He's clearly been trained or schooled in some way.
Yeah, and it's pretty clear it's going to be some sort of important thing, whether good or bad. It could be a good reason why he knows this stuff. It could be the kind of thing that saves the day at the end of the day.
I think he knows it for an ill reason, but it will come to good.
Yes, I think you're right about that. One thing interesting about when he's interpreting this language that comes from the clouds.
Yeah, they roll up on this enormous storm.
Oh, the noxious twilight veil is how Willow describes it. A swirling vortex of rage and madness there's no escape from.
And I love that once that's introduced, the entire rest of the episode is entirely under this storm. It acts like a visual timer. It acts like a clock. There's lightning and rain. It really unifies the entire next 20 or 30 minutes in a really nice way.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say too that the way that Graydon. Sometimes I want to say Grayson because my phone
Oh
kept
yeah.
correcting it to Grayson whenever I type his name in,
Every
and I
time I
like
say it, I'm
Batman
sure I'm
too.
saying it
So
the wrong way. But that's me and every human
Graydon.
name on earth, including my children and my wife. I'm always assuming I'm saying the wrong thing. So
I hope you've mastered those by now, at least.
I'll get there.
Um, yeah. So Graydon, when he's reciting this kind of translation, it all rhymes.
Yeah, it's in verse, which is really nice that he's able to do such an incredible. You know, we've both worked with localization in video
Yes,
games.
exactly.
It's very difficult to translate something true to the spirit, but also to maintain meter and rhythm.
Yeah.
So truly an incredible piece of translation on the
If
fly there.
Graydon were a modern day person in our world, he would make an excellent localizer for video games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wrote down that little rhyming couplet. It is, the stars align, the door is open, a sphere turns, a god is awoken. Extinguish the flame, snuff out the light, and exile the child to the 13th night. Um, and the implication that everybody has in that moment is that, of course, they're talking about Alora.
Yeah.
But I wonder, I mean, because that's sort of that's very much the plot of the original movie. I wonder how much of that is a red herring and whether or not the child in that couplet is actually her at all or somebody else.
Yeah, and I wonder too, just you're reciting it now, especially the line "exile the child." I feel like I remember Bavmorda actually saying that when she's just doing her sorcery to, when she has
Yeah,
Alora at her mercy, basically.
that was the purpose of it. That they couldn't just kill her; they had to,
Right,
completely sort of separate her from the natural world.
right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I remember that specific language, but I could
Yeah,
be
I
off
think so.
there.
You're right. I think so.
But yeah, so they're there, and they have this swirling vortex of rage and madness. There's no escape from. They need to go to, and Willow says something about can't waste any time. So there they go. Meanwhile, we're cutting back to Alora. She has been abducted, but she manages to cut herself free from the ropes
Yeah.
and falls off the horse, runs into the woods.
And I thought it was sort
Uh,
of cool that she frees herself in a very sort of believable, quick thinking way that still doesn't involve magic yet.
yeah,
It's still just her wits. And yeah, she takes off right for that forest, which is sort of a dark wall of trees that the horsemen don't seem to want to ride into.
yeah. She's very quick, and I think there is a little suspension of disbelief involved that they can't catch her for as long as she's in there. But I'll go with it.
Oh yeah,
But
I'm taking the ride.
then we cut back to the rest of the gang, and their wagon wheel has broken.
Yeah.
They're talking about how to fix it. Borman says to Willow, "You can't just levitate it or something," and Willow's like, "No." And this is one of many times that people will turn to Willow and say, "Hey, can you do a little something right here?" And he'll be like, "No."
I think this is the first time also where they start actively making fun of him. Of course, Borman is sort of passive aggressive at first.
Mm-hmm.
But after this, you get other characters sort of expressing that out loud as well. Like, hey, why isn't this guy doing magic?
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting that he's so reluctant right now. What I love about this sequence is that they talk about breaking up instantly. And I think I mentioned before how much I loved the energy of how everybody's together. There's no cross cutting.
Mm-hmm.
We are all one continuous focused quest with one group of characters. And every time there's a chance to split up, Willow even expressly says, if we let her, the crone will use this storm to separate us and weaken us. We have to stay together. So I really feel like that sort of thesis of sticking together and being together is really awesome, and I really love to see that. Right after we have that moment where Willow isn't willing to use his magic, we have that confrontation between Kit and Jade,
Yes.
which there's some interesting subtext going on because Kit thinks Jade hesitated to land a killing blow because Ballantyne is who she is to him. But what Kit slowly finds out, and Jade admits, is that Kit's not as good at sword fighting as she thinks she is, that Jade
Right.
has been letting her win, and that Jade really did need to save her. and it's sort of a devastating thing for Kit, who's sort of built her identity on being like her father, a great swordsman. And it's
And if you remember, the very first scene of the show after the prologue recap was the two of them sparring and Kit winning, or I guess quote unquote winning now.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think I commented in our first episode recap, like it showed what a great swords woman she was, that she was able to defeat this person who was going to this illustrious Galadorn school or whatever.
But it turns out that wasn't quite the metric we thought it was.
Yeah, exactly.
And I wonder, when Eric was saying about he's the second best swordsman.
Yeah.
Does, how far does the fiction extend for Kit? Does everybody think she's the greatest? I love that moment where she's like, I can take care of myself. And she's like, no, you can't. That's what I'm telling you. You literally can't take care of yourself.
Or does Eric even know that
yeah, exactly,
letting Kit win, and maybe perhaps that's the first that he was referring to.
What I think is super interesting about that whole moment is that there's this really interesting asymmetry between royal and non-royal people, where the royals especially feel like, oh, we're all in the same framework here. Of course, we're just buddies here. But for somebody who's not a princess, like, you can't beat the princess at sword fighting. Of course you can't. You could never do that. Like, there's an asymmetry of power that Kit is totally unaware of, that she just thinks we're all a bunch of folk out here. But this is the first time that Jade sort of confronts her with, there's a lot about this that you are wrong about.
Yeah. And you got to wonder too, like, is it going through Kit's mind now that, hey, maybe I'm not that good? I don't think so, based on, she certainly performs admirably later on, but
yeah, she handles her own, absolutely, but she's her confidence has been pricked for sure.
Yeah. And also, on top of this, remember, she just found out that Allura is legit, so and she was wrong about that. So yeah, there's got to be a lot of going through her head about, like, what's really going on here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get back to Allura, and she's going through the forest, and the first thing that happens I found interesting on my second viewing when I watched with the captions on, it pointed out hearing animal noises. And that made me think back to the previous episode when Willow was like, can you commune with animals? So, like, I wonder if she was actually, like, hearing words from these animals that, were dangerous and were coming to get you.
I mean, she's definitely, like, her other senses magically are starting to awaken. So it makes sense that she started getting, like, the sort of trickle of awareness.
And she's looking very scared at that point too. And also, so I think it was Reddit or somewhere where I saw that apparently in the Chris Claremont books, communing with animals is a thing. So that might actually...
I just got a copy in the mail, so I'm going to start down that dark and terrible road, and I'll let you all know real soon.
Are you actually reading that, like, concurrently with the show?
Well, the book came and it has a powerful odor, so I'm leaving it in the garage for 48 hours or so to see if that diminishes.
It just came with that. It literally stinks.
Listen, I'm quite happy to have bought a cheap used book from an independent bookseller, but there is a funk.
Even though I own that book, I'm not going to go reread it again. I might play along with you with the audiobook version that's on YouTube.
All right. Well, which is
abridged.
Happily abridged, yes.
Yes. It's 3 hours flat. Maybe we should do just an episode about Shadow Moon or something at some point.
It depends on how much I hate it.
Okay, so eventually Allura comes to a couple of new characters.
Yes. Hubert and Annie, the woodswoman. And there's something so fantastic about the design, and I can absolutely sort of hear people screaming, why is there more denim? This doesn't fit. This isn't medieval times.
And they are. It doesn't take much looking at Reddit today to see that.
Yeah, that's why I'm not going. I'm not going to look. But I loved it because it brought me to mind of like a Frank L. Baum Oz sort of fantasy,
Hmm.
as opposed to a Narnia Lord of the Rings fantasy, more of a American fantasy, or even like the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, where you
Even
have that.
Final Fantasy.
Yeah, sure. Well, anytime where you have the ability to mix multiple aesthetics without somebody saying, "Well, that's not accurate for medieval fantasy," and
Yeah.
I loved that sort of, that they have the Western hats and the sort of the interesting and patched, buckled miners' denim clothes. But I mean, just beyond the aesthetics, they are such interesting characters from the moment they're introduced. I was
By the
just
way, I saw the term anachronistic used, which it's not Earth.
what?
It's not the history.
I don't. I'm not. I'm not going to engage with that. That's wrong.
And like multiple people, like, yeah, it is an anachronism, blah blah blah. It's like, no, this is a world that doesn't exist. I mean, maybe if
Also,
you're intimately
it's
familiar
awesome.
with this lore that has never been written of
No,
its history.
no, I absolutely loved this completely different vibe for the uncultivated territories, which she calls the forest that
Yes,
they're in.
yes. Did you notice how much suddenly brighter it was?
Yeah, I almost thought that maybe there was some sort of magic or sort of illusion going on, because it goes from being very dark and gray to being very light and very brightly lit in sort of warm, saturated tones. And I'm not entirely certain how intentional it was. At first, I assumed it was, but given how the rest of that scene develops, it just seems like we're meant to think that that's a much more welcoming space after her being frightened in the woods.
Yeah. Did you notice who the actress was playing Hubert?
I do not have familiarity with her, but I love her. That was a delight to watch her say every single word.
Did you watch Ted Lasso at all?
I have heard that that's a television show.
Yes. Okay. She is the character Rebecca, the female lead in Ted
Okay,
Lasso,
is
and
a similar
also
character?
you saw Game of Thrones.
I have heard that that's a television
You
show.
have not seen Game of
I
Thrones.
watched the first season of Game of Thrones, and
Okay.
I have read all the books that have been published to this point. But there was something so bleak about seeing it on screen and not being able to pause. It was just a little too
Interesting.
difficult for me. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I'm going to talk about Game of Thrones a little later in this episode too.
Oh,
But
I exist on the internet too, so I know
her
all about
other
Game of Thrones.
her other kind of big role, which you may have seen in internet memes at least, is
Exactly.
shame, shame, shame,
I have
shame.
absolutely seen that.
Walking Cersei through King's Landing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm
Uh,
familiar with that part in the books as well. Yeah, okay. Is it
yeah.
the
So those are
high
kind of,
priest or the high sept priestess or
I
something?
forget what it's called. Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, I'm not gonna pretend I remember what that character's name was or the actual role, but yeah, she like marched naked Cersei through King's Landing, shame, for like 9 minutes, I think it was.
Well, I was utterly delighted by Hubert and Rorgarth, her axe, named after her beloved paw.
You know, when I heard that, when I watched it the first time, I only heard it, and she says Rorgoth. I heard Morgoth. Are you familiar with Morgoth?
I'm just working my way slowly through the Silmarillion right now.
Well, Frodo was stabbed with the Morgoth blade.
Exactly.
As Strider at that point
No, this is
out.
Rorgarth, the entirely benevolent axe.
I gotta wonder if that's a nod of some sort, and if it's in any way foreshadowing in some sort. So, okay, so there are some internet theories that there's way more to these two than meets the eye. Maybe they're even like the crone in disguise, like casting an illusion or something. I don't know if I buy that. I think a lot of people are questioning the need for this scene. I think it's going to come into play at some point, but I think even right now, it's pretty obvious to me that these are the first like common folk coming across Elora Danan.
Yeah, so
and they're like, "You're her. We're going to do everything we can for you. We're going to enlist in your army," and so that's a very important thing, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. I think actually this scene works in the confines of her character arc perfectly, which is that, she comes asking for help and they're like, hang on, this is so much bigger than all of this. You're actually responsible for all of us. And we're absolutely going to lay down our lives for you. No problem. And I think what this scene is about showing her how much she has responsibility, whether she likes it or not.
What do you think of the theory that they are possibly the crone or some other?
I would be doubtful of that. I think if we see or hear more of them, I think we're going to find out that they may have been Fae, because they feel sort of more like that sort of vibe so far. I was genuinely thrilled when they realized she's a Laura Dannon and they say, can we see the mark? And then they're like, well, this is it. We join your quests. We are on your side forever now. I was genuinely thrilled because I thought these two characters were permanently joining the casts of Willow the TV show.
And as we would find out soon, they are not.
No.
Unless the theories are right, and who knows, they could come back. But
I'll tell you what, let's take a quick word from our sponsors, and then we'll come back.
Let's do that.
All right. Okay. And then do you want to jump now to the wagon and everybody splitting up sequence?
Yes, the pitiless past moment.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you do coming back from the ad break.
And we're back. And we're back to our heroic group of travelers. They're arguing about which route to take to get to the immemorial city at this point.
We get a lovely little list of names again of places they might go.
The first option, suggested by Borman, is the Pitiless Pass.
Yes.
Silas, not a fan of that.
No, so much not a fan that he then threatens to cut Borman when they start arguing about which direction to go.
Yeah, Silas seems has almost animosity toward Borman at this point.
I love them together, and I love them fighting.
Yes. Silas wants the Capella pastures into the voluptuous vale,
which Borman says is going to be much longer, but we realize pretty quickly that Borman has an ulterior motive.
Yes, and voluptuous veil also Kit refers to as the Veil of Boobs, which I found it perhaps overly modern. But
well, they really put a lampshade on top of that joke to make sure we all saw it. But I'll take it. And then that's also the point where Kit and Jade split up, and it seems to be, there's sort of increased tension and animosity, and I feel like Kit really wants to prove herself, maybe not just to Jade, but to herself, that she can actually take care of herself. But it's still sort of heartbreaking to see them being pushed apart like that.
I did find it interesting, and maybe not even in a good way, but the previous scene was about how they need to stay together and never go apart, and the next thing they do is divide up into two different ways through where they need to go.
Well, and I think Willow would probably be the one that would reject that, but he has a moment where he's sort of struck by sort of an unseen pain. We don't really know where that's coming from at that time. But I did.
It's a vision. It's like a vision of. Are you referring to the moment where he sees like Alora looks like she's kind of possessed or something?
Exactly, yeah. And also during that, when he's struck by that, his staff seems to glow as well.
And he grabs his side.
Yeah, it seemed to be sort of a painful thing that was happening to him.
And that, I'd have to go back and watch, but I feel like he might have been grabbing that side in the scene in Tears Lean in the movie after they take Alora. And he's like, they took Alora. And he's got like blood on his head, and I might be wrong, but I wonder.
Well, we have been talking sort of in the text about how Willow is not able to take the beatings that he used to, that he's not able to. Yeah. So I mean, it's very in keeping that he's got persistent, constant, pains like that.
Yeah, but I wonder if there's something specific that happened to him right there at that spot that he
Yeah.
was grabbing, or there's some importance to it.
So when we get back to Alora, and with Hubert and Annie in the woods, she really doesn't sort of grasp the responsibility that they're sort of thrusting on her at that moment. But Valentine shows up, and I love that Hubert gets to be competent and a cool fighter. Like, she has a
Yeah,
very distinct sort of like loose axe swinging style that looks like, it looks like how a woodswoman
that axe
would
has a
fight.
name for a reason.
Yeah, yeah, she's very, very like keen with it. And it's so heartbreaking that she's killed almost instantly. But I do love that they let her get, a cool blow in, and that her
Mhm.
mistake was just not realizing how deeply evil, the people
Exactly.
she was fighting was.
Well, not
Um,
even just evil, but like supernatural
yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah, because
yeah,
she put the axe 5 or 6 inches into his back.
yeah, yeah. That should have destroyed him, but it did not.
Yeah, and then as Anne and Alora run away, so she begs Valentine to spare her, and they cut her down for no reason. She's already left. There's absolutely no tactical reason for it. And Valentine has this really creepy thing where he underlines in a very negative way the exact thing that was coming across before, which is, hey, these people are your responsibility, whether you like it or not, and you are responsible for them
Yep.
dying, which is a terrible sort of like abusive, like partner language to
Yeah.
use about what's happened. But, he's really trying to manipulate her into feeling powerless, like an abusive
All you
partner
have to
would.
do is submit, he says.
Yeah,
Let's go
yeah.
back to the scene with Elora showing the mark and everything. I did think it was worth noting that she like goes out of her way to talk about the princess Kit, and that Kit seems to hate her and she doesn't know why. I feel like, you know, we get that already just by watching Kit, but I feel like they really want to drill that home.
Yeah, well, I also think that's sort of lovely in a way that it underlines the larger scene, is because she's like, yeah, I'm a Laura Dannon, but like, there's this princess who hates me and is super mean to me, and I don't know, and like their response is, yeah, we need to get you to a castle and raise an army behind you.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
they have a much more different perspective on what her most pressing needs are. And yeah, her needs are, these people around me are treating me poorly and it's not fair, which is a completely legitimate need, especially for the sort of scale that she's used to.
Yeah,
This is new to her.
exactly. So soon we cut back to Borman and Kit, and there's something that's just a throwaway line right here that I think might come into play later. After Thule impaled his brother on a spike, and then uh, Kit cuts him off. But so we know from the earlier story that Thule won.
Yeah.
I gotta wonder, like, are we gonna see like bones on a spike and during the course of this adventure or something?
Well,
Uh, or is what's his name, Tiberius? Is he going to play a role in this in some way?
I would think almost certainly, because at first I sort of felt like as they were putting new lore and new legends on us, that it was just sort of just interesting things. But they've been so focused on Chimeria, the Chimerian Curious, the last blood of Chimeria. Their lore building is all still pointed in the same direction. So I definitely think that we're building up to like a larger understanding of this ancient thing. And I think that, whoever the power balance of the Crone and the Gales is going to be related to that as well.
Yeah. So Borman goes on to talk about Madmartigan a bit. He says a line: "You get lucky or you get dead. I got lucky." And throughout the course of this, he really thinks Madmartigan died
Yeah. He,
because
yeah.
he thinks Madmartigan would have come back if he hadn't died, and what things would be different. I think is what he says.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now we go back to our other group, and they're having wagon problems. Jade says this wagon sucks.
Yeah. And again, Willow is conspicuously not using magic to help. Jade at that point is...
And again, he's being called out. Jade doesn't say this to Willow's face, but she says, "You'd think that Willow would contribute a bit more, being the world's last great sorcerer and all."
Yeah, yeah.
And then they talk about like, did he used to be great, and now he's lost his mojo?
Yeah. And then he starts talking with Silas about, how he used to have so much more energy. And, it really, he's talking about sort of, I used to have energy to plow the fields and then dance with Kaya. And he's talking about that. But what he starts to lean into is that his magic is limited, and he knows he only has so much that he has to give before he's expended. And I think that the way that they sort of tying the energy in your life in your later age and, his limited magic ability is a nice and sort of tragic bit of meat to chew on. Because
in RPG terms, his MP is dwindling, and he does not feel that he can gain the XP to get to another level.
Yeah.
Replenish it.
You know what? Perfect. That works. That's absolutely correct.
I think I hope if you're listening that you have at least played Final Fantasy or something.
No, I'm sure more than one. So Kit and Borman arrive at the Slaughtered Lamb, which is the inn that he said...
Oh, we skipped something with Willow here.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
He has a vision, and it appears to be Nockmaar. And he says, "I know where they're going."
I didn't catch that it was Nockmaar until the second viewing, in which we confirmed that it's absolutely Nockmaar. But yeah, that's the vision is how he's able to sort of track onto them, which is interesting that he has that vision at that time, drawing them there. I'll bring that up in a minute. Yeah. So then we go back to Kit and Borman, who are arriving at the Slaughtered Lamb, which is the inn that Borman has decided that they want to go to. And the Slaughtered Lamb is, it took me a brief second to dredge my memory bank, but the name of the pub in American Werewolf in London, where the main characters meet the werewolf to begin with, or rather are first introduced. So that was a cool little nod to another sort of 80s property there as well.
Yeah, I looked it up online too. Apparently there's a bar in New York called the Slaughtered Lamb, possibly named after that American Werewolf in London.
I think it actually is, yeah.
And, like we talked about last episode, it seems like every episode has some sort of 80s movie reference in it.
I'm not going to catch all of them, so I am glad that you are here to point them out to me.
Well, so far, every one has had at least one thing. If it was Young Guns 2, or The Princess Bride, or possibly The Monster Squad, when Willow says, "Oh, Nards." There's been some sort of 80s. Well, Young Guns 2 is technically 90, but that same era. Hold on, I gotta go. I heard a crash.
No worries. We'll take a brief pause here. I'll just keep recording. For the video audience, I'll just do a small sort of a dance. I don't think I want to do a dance. I apologize. If Chris gets murdered on the webcam here and I have to see it, I'm going to be very disappointed. This is not how I wanted to spend my evening. Don't die, Chris. Don't die. Everything good?
All right. Note to self at about 45 minutes to edit this. I think like this suction cup thing we have in our bathroom, like suctioned and just fell.
Yeah.
It's
just
really
those
loud.
Random accidents
it came through on
it was huge. It sounded like something thudding upstairs. Yeah.
Yeah. The bathroom's like right on the other side of this wall. So hitting the bathtub like magnified it.
I got an easy place to start if I can.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
So at the Slaughtered Lamb, Borman and Kit is sort of frustrated at Borman for leading them astray because it's a ruin. It's been converted into a graveyard. But it's very clear that that's what Borman came for. He mentions that when they were last here, they gave a secret to the owner of the Slaughtered Lamb, and it was something that he would take to his grave. And then we immediately cut to Borman grave robbing, which brought me a great deal of delight. It's really fun to sort of enter a dungeon and just be like, oh, we're
Yes.
going to do a dungeon. It's incredible.
Yeah,
There's
I was like, oh, this is the Diablo level right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Borman sort of giddily hops down this pit in the middle and says, watch out for were-rats. Which, oh, now that I mentioned that, were-rats is an obvious thing to show up at a werewolf-related location.
Exactly.
Yeah, and she says, what are were-rats? And he says, you'll know exactly what they sound like.
Yeah, once again, a Willow, it's very on brand for Willow to call out a thing and then it shows up. You don't have to wait very long in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. And and the rapidity of the jokes and the quips has been really charming. Like I'm really pleased to see how much of a straight out comedy it is. And I have to sort of figure out why I think normally this level of quippiness and, sarcastic, snarky characters tends to grate on me. But these characters are also damn charismatic at this point. I really enjoy their snark.
What's interesting to me is I had seen that joke in a like a quick promo piece on Twitter or something, and it didn't do anything for me there. But like watching it in full context, it actually did, and that's not the first time that's happened. So it's weird to me how the humor lands in context more than just like in.
And not just the humor. More than one person has said to me that the previews that they watched or the sample clips felt odd or unusual, but once they saw them in context, they enjoyed them or disliked them on their own merits.
Fair enough. So yeah, now we're back outside. Valentine is all like, boys, we're going home. And Elora is like, you guys suck. Basically, she doesn't say that. She could have said that in the context of the show. So I'm clarifying that she does not actually say that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's in keeping of the modern language at this point.
Says.
But no, she actually has a very savage and insightful thing that she says, which is like, you guys are being used. You're not meant to survive this. Look at yourselves. Like you are not getting what you think you are. And I like that it sort of works for a moment. Like they all seem to be like, oh yeah, maybe. Because it really does sort of speak to how much there is like of the original personality inside. They all sort of have some awareness of it.
Yeah, so they want to go up this path. They're like, Elora, you got to come with us. You got to submit. She's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And she reaches out and just touches one of them. And it's like garlic to a vampire face.
Yeah, her touch burns instantly.
Yes. So there is definitely some sort of Elora enchantress magic against the forces of darkness that we get a tangible example of right here.
And it gives her that incredible sort of burst of confidence where she's like, yeah, I'm a sorcerer. Let's do this. And Valentine completely calls her bluff and he's like, feel free, go ahead.
She says, I'm magic, you stupid cankers, which is
I really enjoyed that as an insult. Like it's an unusual, it doesn't feel like a modern insult, but it doesn't necessarily feel like a fantasy insult. It was
right.
It was kind of fun.
I hate canker sores, so that's a terrible thing. And
so you know exactly what she's calling him.
She says, "I'm the greatest sorceress there ever was," and then Valentine calls her out, and she tries to do this Hawatha.
Yeah. Now, what was super striking to me about this on two different watches is the first time I was like, "Oh, she tries to do magic and it fails," because one of the themes we have in Willow is that magic fails, is untrustworthy. It doesn't solve your problems.
Yeah, we should note that she's specifically stated she is going to say the forces of good are going to come to her aid.
Yes. On the second watch, I noticed that that's what she says the spell is, that the forces of good are going to come save her. And so the first time I saw it is the magic doesn't save her. It's the rock being thrown from off screen. But no, she absolutely, it's not a flashy sort of magic, but she summons and then there her friends are.
The exact same thing happened to me. The first watch, I thought it was a total failure. The second one, I'm still not convinced it wasn't a failure, but the grounds are there.
It sort of reminds me of that classic joke of the guy on the top of his roof in a flood, saying he's waiting for God, and the boat comes and the helicopter comes, and those powers work in seemingly mundane ways, possibly.
Sure, exactly. Maybe there'll be more to that later. Maybe we'll get some sort of confirmation, or maybe not. But so Valentine sees Jade again.
Yeah.
I've seen the future, the Eternal One. Have we heard this term yet?
The Eternal One was part of the original prophecy that was written on the Mother's Gate on the barrier.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, the Eternal One will cleanse this world of all disease and pain, which I believe something to that effect, if not those exact words, were part of that.
Yeah, that is very similar to the original prophecy, which is talking about the harbinger of the worm.
Yeah, so what do we think that means? The Eternal One will cleanse this world of all disease and pain.
I mean, I think there's sort of a religious element to the enemies this time that we didn't have in the first one, where Bavmorda was about power, and so she understood that her power came from this sort of larger magical structure. But this is the first time we've gotten a sense of enemies or adversaries who sort of fervently and religiously believe what they're talking about, which is always sort of a really interesting area for me anyway. I'm more intrigued by it.
It sounds like a good thing. A world without disease and pain would be great.
Yeah.
But what if that world didn't have disease and pain because everyone was dead?
That's the sort of monkey's paw version of that wish.
Yes.
Yeah. But I also think that's also really compelling to have characters have a believable positive thing. Like good versus good is always more interesting, and evil that is thinking they're doing something for the right reason, and the ends justify the means, is just always a much more interesting story than
the greatest villain is always the hero of his own story.
Yeah, exactly.
Said many times.
It's trite at this point, but it's interesting. I love it. I mean,
it's true. It's
true.
It's trite because it's true. So we get, in the past couple episodes, we've had modern music come in at the end of the show. Right now, we get some guitars.
Yeah.
This battle sequence.
First time I watched it, I got terrified because I thought the song was going to start in the middle of the fight, and I was not thrilled. On the second watch, just having the guitar sort of punctuate that moment worked great. It was actually kind of fun. And before the fight actually starts, before the guitar chord, when Valentine and Jade have their face off, and she has that moment where she's like, well, my only choice is to fight you and to kill you. Before, she's drawn on him in that same sort of thing, and she has this expression in the forest of, almost fear, and she draws very slowly. This time I thought was super interesting is that she pulls up her mask and puts it on. Her mask doesn't appear to be a full helmet. It doesn't appear to be a protective thing at all. And I've also noticed that Valentine, before he engages in combat, frequently puts it down, which I always thought was just the knight putting the mask down. But I'm wondering now if there's a sort of ceremonial element to masking before combat, because it felt very ceremonial the way she put it on. Like, if I'm going to have to kill you, I'm going to hide my face from you. Or so I'm wondering if there's something more to that moment that she has of putting her face behind the mask.
Yeah. I think there is some protection element there, but it maybe almost, General Kale kind of had the same thing going on, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like a part of this world where you want to have a mask that isn't just to protect your face. It's also got some personality to it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other mask element that I hadn't combined to that. But I think masks matter more than they have said out loud so far. And I think that they've done a lot of world building where they haven't said things that I would have thought they would say. But it just seems sort of apparent in the way that it is played out.
Yeah. What did you think of the lighting in this battle here?
It's really dark.
Yeah.
And I also have a brand new TV that I stubbornly set to all the sort of dark cinema settings because I want to be an obnoxious cinemaphile. And I could see what was going on, but I would have liked a slightly higher contrast.
Yeah, I agree.
That said, I do think that the rain and the like pulses of lightning when they did happen and the thunder made for a really dynamic and like interesting sort of a fight sequence. But I did feel occasionally like I wanted to see, and some of the choreography was really, really interesting, especially Jade and Kit once they sort of are working in tandem and like blocking sword strikes together. I would have liked to have seen those a little more clearly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably my biggest issue with the scene. I mentioned I was gonna call back to Game of Thrones again. This is like the darkest battle I've seen since the. Maybe you heard about it anyway, but there was an episode in the last season. There was like an important battle against the White Walkers, and uh, it was really dark. And there were people who actually complained to HBO that like there was a problem with their reception or whatever. But no, it was just at night and dark.
Okay, so we're
And it
talking
was hard to see.
lightness, not thematically dark.
Yes.
Okay,
I mean,
right.
literal lack of light.
Yeah,
And this had more light than that.
yeah.
But it's like right. It's the closest thing I've seen to that since that, like in 18 or 19, whatever that was.
And as this whole fight is going on, we cut back to Borman and Kit. Borman doesn't sort of say explicitly, in fact, he lies outright, but it's clear that he finds what looks like the Lux Arcana, the key to the Chimerian Cuirass.
Did you say that without having it written down? Because I always forget what it's called.
I absolutely did, and if you check the video playback, my eyes didn't even go to the book.
I know, I'm looking at your eyes right now, and
yeah. So but I love that he puts it in his pocket, and he's immediately like, I didn't find anything. And the way we've established Borman so far is I don't know if he's stealing that for himself or if he's just holding back information because that's how he is managing the rest of the group. He's a wily one.
Well, in some way or another, he knows it needs to be found. And is it for purely selfish reasons, or because no one else knows it's there?
Well, also the most serious and sincere we've seen him be, in fact, the only time we've seen him be sincere or serious, is when he's talking about this legend and what it meant to him.
Yeah, that's true. 1/3 of it was true, he says at one point.
Exactly 1/3 of what I've said.
Yeah.
And we also get our first glimpse of a were-rat at this moment, which is the most delightful practical effects. Like it could have been a real cheap CG thing. And it's a very brief moment, and the were-rat puppet doesn't seem to have a whole lot of articulation. The fight with it is very quick and done mostly through editing. But my heart soars every time I see a practical creature, and especially in keeping with the great sort of Phil Tippett creatures of the original Willow movie.
And it's totally what I like your kind of generic Diablo style level where you gotta clear the basement full of rats.
Yeah, exactly. Rats in the basement.
But and it's also like kind of in line with the movie in that, the Ybor Sisk, if you go back and look at it, it's not exactly a 2022 creation, right? It's stop motion animation. It's very of its time. It doesn't really hold up, but it holds up well enough, and it worked in its time. So it kind of the practical were-rats kind of fall in line with the Willow DNA, I guess.
Yeah, they're delightful.
Yeah, I thought it was cool too. You basically have in the same way that kind of Star Wars movies often have like 2 or 3 battles going at once. You have 2 battles going on at once right here.
And I really love the way that those 2 battles combine. Is Borman says something about like, let's bash our way into the next burial mount. And then when we cut back outside, he and Kit like literally burst out of a wall and save somebody in the middle of a fight. It was a really cool way to sort of merge those all at the same moment.
Convenient, but yeah, cool at the same time.
I'm here for all Deus Ex Machina.
Oh, sure.
I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, we cut back to now everybody's involved in this big dark fight.
Yeah, now it's a fracas.
Silas is just holding his own with those daggers against.
God, he's so cool. I mean, he's just like stabbing people in the back. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. You have this nice kind of exchange between Graydon and Alora, where Graydon's like, I'm the reason you got taken in the first place. I'm not going to let that happen again. Again, kind of building on what seems to be a love story between those two.
And then he's actually almost capable in that fight. Like he goes to save Silas. He is proactive. He almost, he's worth like 0.75 people in that fight.
Exactly. And then I believe I didn't jot down who actually said this, but do magic. I think it was Laura who said that to Willow.
Yeah,
and
they're sort
Willow's
of,
just like he has this like look on his face, like I don't want to, like
he has nothing to offer at that moment, and he's
mm,
watching sort of in fear as Silas is taking more and more blows, and then he has this suggestion that they will use some sort of strange thing he's brought called Cermillion wax, and
before basically something like that.
right, and we get a sense that this is dangerous because Graydon says, "Do you know how dangerous that is?" And then immediately lightning strikes the wagon and explodes. So Willow is left without any of his ways that he could possibly assist without magic.
Yes, and eventually, oh, actually, also around this time, we have Graydon being attacked, and it appears that the whatever that curse is that
Yeah.
cursed all these dudes, it's been passed on to him.
Well, we know it
Or
can be passed on now because Ballantyne clearly passed
yeah,
it on. Yeah.
yeah, and he actually he says something about dark magic. But he seems to be with us right now. But the big thing that happens is a Vogdul. Willow shouts. Avagdul is
Yeah, the
spell.
trigger for him finally deciding to use his magic is when Silas takes, what appears to be almost a mortal injury by being thrown against the wall.
Yes, I should have mentioned that.
That's the sort of trigger that allows Willow uh, to realize that this is a moment that is worth the use of magic. And that again, that magic seems to be extremely painful and difficult for him to do. You see it sort of driving him to the ground, and it's causing him great physical pain.
Yes, and you wonder how much of that MP has left after using that as well. Um, but yeah, you do see the effects. I didn't really notice the first time I watched, but the second time I watched, you clearly see the darkness kind of leaving Valentine.
Yeah, his skin and his flesh are still marked by it, but it appears like the magic is sort of blasting the possession out of him.
Yeah, and he does have this kind of sweet exchange with Jade, which the first time I watched it, not having noticed the blackness leave him, I thought maybe it was a trick. Like, because he says, "You did good, kid. You've got to get Allura to the Immemorial City."
Yeah.
And maybe it is. Maybe
Well,
there was still some evil in him.
he
Yeah,
asks
but probably
her
not.
he asks her to kill him at that point, and I
Yeah,
felt like the implication was enough of Ballantyne could come out to be in control for a while, but he knew that he was never going to be in control again. Also in that scene, we have the confirmation that Ballantyne trained her and raised her, so that he's as close to a father figure as that she has. And I like that. I think another show might have said that out loud the first time they were introduced, like, well, I raised you. And I liked sort of learning that detail about them in this moment, in this sort of
sure.
intimate moment. We also at the same time have Silas and Willow exchanging their last words. And I'm very angry that your prediction was correct.
It was. I would have said episode 5 or 6 for that, but it
Yeah.
happened really quick.
Yeah, in an episode where you've already brought on Hubert and Anne, who I've decided are my two best friends for all time, and then killed them, I did not expect Silas to go. I sort of thought the death of Hubert was going to be the sort of traditional, hey, these are the stakes, a character can die at any moment. I certainly didn't think it was Silas so quickly, or Ballantyne for that matter.
True.
So there's an acceleration of the sort of traditional status quo of where I would expect a narrative to kick out the tires underneath itself and start from something new. But a lot changed by the end of this episode.
Yeah, and I was only half right in my prediction. I did predict he would die. I did predict he would pass along his wood carving. But he did not hand it to Borman and say its name is Borman.
It's my headcanon that it's Borman is carved on the belly so that it will always
Yeah,
be there.
maybe
Yeah. Hey,
that could be the case.
headcanon is the only canon.
Maybe we could find out. That's keep hope alive. So hey, I got a question for you. So we got Willow there, and Silas has died basically there.
Yeah, and we
Is
also
wait what?
oh,
You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this. Is Willow a Silas mourner? He doesn't love it.
I don't know that you can see the look that I'm giving at you over the audio medium of podcast, but I rotated my head slightly and then tilted
I
my
hated
gaze
that book in
down.
10th grade. But it made for a really stupid joke 20 years later. No, it's been more than
Well,
that.
then that's the payoff. That's why you read that book all these years ago. We also we learn here at the end that Graydon is possessed. He says bad magic.
Yes.
So there's a lot that's shifted by the end of this, and they decide that the only way they can go is to follow the way that Ballantyne was going to begin with, up these steps, which are, again, I think they're using the same beautiful slate quarry in Wales that they filmed the original movie in. But sort of they reach the top of it, and that's when they realize that Willow knows exactly where they are. And we get
Knockmar.
Yeah, we get this lovely pan up to Knockmar Castle.
Leading up to it.
I noticed that the storm seems to be focused entirely above Knockmar Castle.
Interesting.
So I'm wondering how much of that is the sort of center of this storm that has suddenly entered the world and acted as our dramatic countdown.
Yes, and leading up, before we even see Knockmar Castle, we get dun, 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 dun,
yes.
Dun, 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 dun,
helpfully identified by the subtitles as rock music.
I didn't catch it this time, but yeah, it's definitely rock music, and it's the first one I recognize. You recognize
it was a cover of a Metallica song.
Yes, I think everyone recognizes this one.
Not a terrible cover, not my favorite song, not my favorite style. I do think that if the lyrics can wait till the credits, I'm more okay with the use of modern music. It's the lyrics are the part that make it feel so out of place. But again,
Take My Hand to Never Neverland is close to Take My Hand to the Netherworld.
Yeah, I think I would just prefer a lovely outro theme, but it's an aesthetic choice that I didn't get to make, and that's fine.
I'm growing more and more okay with it. I feel like in this episode, we're like saying it sucks. I think someone says kick his ass at one point. Yeah, there's all sorts of language that is very modern. The show knows what it is now, and
certainly,
whether or not people want to accept that or not,
there's absolutely a confidence and a purity of what they know they are and what they're doing. And you can be on board with that or you can not be, but it's gonna go.
Yeah, totally. All right, so yeah, that's what was this one called? The Battle of the Slaughtered
Episode 3, Battle of the Slaughtered Lamb.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3, Battle of the Slaughtered Lamb.
Exactly. All right, so I guess it's time to give a rating.
Yeah.
I
forget who went. Yeah, I'll go first this time. I was delighted by this episode in a lot of ways, and I will give this my first extremely qualified and just over the border and good.
Nice.
Primarily just the delight that was Hubert and Anne. I loved the way that she was written. It felt so unique to any of the other voices and accents that we've heard. It felt like this just beautiful little glimpse of another part of Willow World that we haven't seen yet. And I love that sort of Wizard of Oz style fantasy look to it. That scene alone really was such a standout. But I do think the rest of it, I think the grave robbing and the sort of the fast driving quality to, we need to rescue this person, there's a storm. It had a really nice rhythm and internal momentum that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. It's just a solid good again for me. I think it probably about on par with the first chapter.
Yeah.
And I think maybe if certain things, like if the last scene hadn't been so dark, just literally dark.
Yeah.
And I I don't know. I'm having trouble thinking of other things that maybe I didn't like as much, but it was definitely enjoyable, and I enjoyed watching it
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh,
There's no episode I haven't enjoyed watching twice with a close eye.
yeah, and I feel like I always liked them more after having talked to you about it.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I feel like that's sort of the benefit of the water cooler model of talking about media is, when you both like something, you can sort of bounce off it and figure out what you liked, and it sort of fits in. The same also happens when you both collectively hate something, but fortunately, that's not happening here.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm curious, actually, listeners, if you want to tell us if, I don't know, listening to us talk about these episodes make you appreciate or perhaps even dislike an episode more than you already did.
Or anything
Uh,
that you'd rather hear more of or less of, or anything in specific.
yeah, hit us up on Twitter at a Willow Podcast. We also have an Instagram at the same thing, but I haven't even posted anything there yet. I just keep forgetting about it.
We can be
Um,
found.
yeah, yeah, and we'll post stuff to Reddit and face. There's a Facebook group I post stuff on sometimes under my name, Chris Baker. But we're not done with this episode yet.
Chris,
Uh,
before we get to predictions, may I
yes,
do a lore dump?
dump away, my friend.
All
Dump
right.
away.
In episode 3, these are the new concepts and ideas that we all have to grapple with. Thule, Tiberius, Annabelle, Chromium, the Lux Arcana, Death Dealers, the Uncultivated Territories, Pitiless Pass, Capella Pastures, Voluptuous Vale, McCracken's Farm, and Cermillion Wax.
McCracken's Farm. I forgot about that.
You will all be expected to know what all of those mean in detail by the time we get to our next episode.
Yeah, we should have a quiz at the end of all. I mean, I don't even know what half of those are, but yeah,
Oh,
Willow.
I didn't say I knew what they were. I just wrote them down.
Well, Willow. He and Silas worked at McCracken's farm, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
from dusk till dawn, he still had time to party with Kaya till the sun rose. With party dude, man. Who knew?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we'll come to a part with predictions here.
Yeah. Do you want to hit me with your predictions?
I have a few. You said you don't really have anything we haven't discussed.
I would like to sort of wave my little flag in the air that Willow said Haster is not a name to be trusted.
Okay.
I believe that I still am correct about that.
Is that what he said? I thought he said it was just like
it's not a particularly illustrious name to begin with. After he says, I brought shame.
I thought
on
it was
Haster.
a literal, just like Haster is kind of an ugly word.
No, I think I think he's got some sort of evil past, because
Okay.
you don't pull a name out of the King in Yellow for nothing.
Okay. So yeah, I've got a few here. They get a little crazier as we go. The first one's pretty simple but pretty big, and I think could actually happen. So, in a lot of ways, this show is, it's obviously a sequel. There's a word, reboot equal or something. There's a word people use for things that happen way later,
but still within the same continuity.
Yeah, but in the same continuity. And it's kind of like Creed, to Rocky. And I feel like they could have called this show Elora, and the Willow fans still would have gone to it, and the new audience they're looking for would have been equally as inclined to watch it. But it's called Willow, which makes me think that Willow really will be the hero at the end of the day here. And go ahead. Sorry.
I wonder how much of that is the sort of branding of the recognizable name of Willow. I mean, but you are right. So far, it does really feel like Elora and the gang are the major characters in the way that, Rey in Star Wars was the major character, and Luke was and Willow are passing off the torch.
Yeah, but like we were saying, and like the marketing for this show has been, like, a lot of people don't know Willow. I think they could have easily just called it Elora if this is like truly Elora's show. And it's largely Elora's show, but I think at the end of the day, it still will be Willow's show. And I think a big part of this you know, if I asked you what it means that Elora is like the child of prophecy that's going to save everyone, like what does that actually mean?
I think I wouldn't have the foggiest idea. And I think it's even sort of unclear in the first movie. It's whatever she's going to do as a child of prophecy exists in the future, and the purview of the first movie is killing her as a child before that ever comes to pass. So I am aware of a prophecy, but I'm not entirely certain what it might be.
So here's what I think is going to happen, and it's based largely on the fact that Willow sucks right now, right?
Yeah, he does.
As a sorcerer.
I was going to fight you on that, but no.
No, he kind of sucks right now, and I think that what Elora will be able to do is bring out the actual badass sorcerer that is Willow through her power, and in that way, she has saved the realm by making, Willow will wind up being the almighty sorcerer.
Yeah.
Sorcerer Supreme.
To mix your metaphors.
Yes.
I would definitely like to see some sort of like redemptive quality to Willow, because he's sort of not only fallen on hard times, but is sort of angry about his lost confidence in how he is. But I also think I'd prefer to see, in the sense that a lot of these remakes or prequels, sequels, whatever we're calling
There's a term and I forgot it.
In a sense that a lot of these revisiting of old properties often feature older characters sort of passing the torch off generationally. I mean, I think it makes sense for it to be that ultimately Willow enables her journey or her heroism, and not the other way around. But I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to watch and see. Okay, another one. This is just kind of playing off of stuff we've already talked about, in that we don't really trust the Hasters so much. So I'm just going to read what I wrote here. The Hasters are more interested in seeing Galadorn reign superior to all than they are being equal to Tirzleen. That's their kind of secret motive here. With Elora being Empress of Tirzleen, they themselves are inherently inferior to Tirzleen as Galadorn. As a result, the king has made an alliance with the Crone and was completely in on the attack by the Gales, roping Graydon into it as well. He doesn't know the specifics. He just that what he has. He's just doing what he has to do to ensure that Galadorn is on top. Eric is his prisoner in Galadorn, while the Crone has been feeding false visions to both Willow and Sorsha. This includes Sorsha hearing Willow's voice, which was the Crone all along.
I like that, because we also both talked about how we weren't sure if that actually was Willow or not. And I think I keep getting struck by how canned Graydon's story is when he talks about Eric being kidnapped. It has the air of being pre-written and being sort of rehearsed.
He knows these things. One like kind of hole when we talked about it last time that occurred to me is I forgot that they didn't know that Elora was Elora going into the quest. So why would he send Graydon to keep an eye on her or whatever? I think that just kind of I think the aspect of what I just said, that he doesn't have any specifics on why things are being done here.
Well, it's possible that he was sent to delay or to make sure that they aren't successful, or because he does. King Haster whispers into his ear some sort of secret.
Right. Yeah, it's true. Okay, finally, this is a doozy. It's going to take me a while to read it.
All right, let's do it.
What if there was an extra layer to protecting Elora than we already have seen? What if having her forget everything and become Brunhilde was designed to be a fake out to fool even those who think they know the truth, like Willow and Sorsha? What if the sorcery at play here also swapped the actual souls of Kit and Elora? So the soul of Elora is in Kit, the soul of Kit is in Elora.
Yeah.
As a result, there's a long way to go here.
Oh boy.
As a result, the one calling herself Elora right now has the DNA of Allura, which allows her to do things like pass through the barrier and to wound one of the Gale that's infected with her touch. And she can do simple magic that anyone can do if they practice the spell enough, as she did with the berries. You know, in this world, maybe anybody can actually do that spell so long as they have the spell book.
Yeah, we haven't really discovered what the judgment on magic is. Who can and can't use it.
Right. So at the same time, Kit is brimming with potential as a sorceress, and she has no idea. And she also is the true Empress herself. Okay, so now think back to Eric and Brunhilde / Dove / not actually Allura, according to this theory. They had a very Luke and Leia kiss moment, and possibly a little more. But with Brunhilde showing real chemistry with Graydon, we could end up with the actual Tirzline Galadorn matchup that was going to happen, but this time with actual love involved.
Well, I mean, that would be my preference always. I think the sort of the separation of mind and body into two different parts, like that's a very classic sort of fairy tale type magical realism sort of a separation. So if that came in as a plot element, I wouldn't be disappointed by that at all. That'd be interesting. That said, I don't know how you got there, and I'm glad you did. But
I'm not done.
Oh my god! Okay, keep going. I'm sorry.
So as a bonus here, this would actually line up pretty well with the Chris Claremont books, where Elora was hidden till her teenage years, and she turned out to be a spoiled brat, unlikable in the same way that many see Kit. She may even have a birthmark herself that she's hiding from everyone, which explains her doubt in Allura beyond simple jealousy. So when she says, "What if I'm Allura Dannon?" like she did in episode 2, it's actually a hint, and not just her being sarcastic.
Oh no! Now you have actual textual evidence. That's okay.
I told you this was gonna.
Yeah, no,
this is probably nonsense, but it kind of makes sense.
I have a much harder time arguing with it when you've come with quotes and receipts.
Yes,
I think
that's it.
That's a possibility. All right. Before we wrap up, can I do a couple quick shout outs?
Please.
We had some very lovely reviews on Apple, and I'm very grateful for all of you who went out. As I said, I've heard on podcasts before that you're supposed to ask for reviews on Apple, and that helps people find the podcast. Whether that's true or not, I'm asking you to review the podcast. And if you do so, we're happy to read out your shout outs on the air. So here we go. This review reads, "So often good. Two children of the 80s talking about a film property only children of the 80s remember that has somehow become a streaming era TV show." Yeah, that's the thesis of our show. Absolutely.
Yep.
Not for nothing, the sound quality is pristine. Thank you very much. And what more do you want from a podcast? You redacted Daikinis. I'm not sure why he redacted "stupid," which is the quote from the film, but I do appreciate the
stupid fat Taikini, I believe.
It's not a swear. You can say those words, but thank you to Gabe is a taken nickname, who gave us that very lovely review. I also wanted to send out a huge thank to my friend John Warren, who talked me through a lot of the sets, who talked me through a lot of the problems of setting up a podcast for the first time, and had a lot of really wonderful advice. He has a really fantastic podcast called "If You're Driving, Close Your Eyes," which you can read all about in the show notes.
Sounds like terrible advice,
but a great podcast.
What is it about? I don't know what it's about from that title.
Absolutely everything.
Okay, so it's like the opposite of Seinfeld.
Yes, no, yeah, absolutely. It's everything and nothing all together at once.
I see.
Chris, would you like to do our classic outro?
Oh, our classic outro, which I keep forgetting the actual quote. Forget the bird, follow the. Wait, didn't you say something about an interview or something?
Wait, do the outro. I'll do it. I'll do it the other way.
So our classic outro, which still makes no sense to me, but I'll say it anyway. Forget the bird, follow the river, unless the river's going the wrong way. then go the right way. Or
Love it. All right. Bye, y'all. Oh, wait, shoot. We have a special guest.